am having a very bad day. I am in no mood. This, today, is one of the worst days that I've had in a long time.
Okay, all right. So the Saints 24-25 season is officially over. Thankfully, it is over. Now, before we, talk about the future of the Saints, let's recap this season a bit. Let's recap it, all right? Where do we start? Let's start off, week 1. It's the Carolina Panthers. We put this to the Carolina Panthers' backside in a game which, to be honest, I didn't know how it was going to go. I really didn't. I didn't know how the team was going to fare this season. I thought that was going to be one of those games where it was a trap game to start things off. We would get upset. But, credit to the Saints. They ended up not only beating them, but putting this to their backside. BTB, belt to behind, or belt to backside. You choose. But, we win that game. We travel to Dallas in a game which, like the Panthers game, I didn't know what was expected of the team. But, guess what? Put this to their backside too. And we ended up blowing the Dallas Cowboys out at their home stadium. Now granted, Dallas hasn't been able to win a lot of games at their home stadium this year, but hey, it is what it is. We started that trend. Well, no we didn't. Green Bay did, but we started the trend for this season. But we're 2-0 at that point. Then things started to nosedive a bit. Okay, week 3 against the Philadelphia Eagles. Took an L. In a game where it was pretty competitive throughout the whole game, but then ultimately, we ended up losing. It really came down to one defensive play that ended up, costing us that game. The Eagles completed a pass to Dallas Goedert when 2 of our players ran into each other. That ultimately led to a blown coverage. Dallas Goedert took it down, I believe, 55, 60 yards. Then the Eagles ultimately scored the touchdown. And then in response, Derek Carr, the next drive, threw an interception. Game was pretty much over. So, at that point, we're 2-1. Not too concerned about it, but hopefully get things fixed and move over to the next one. The next one ended up being the Atlanta Falcons. A game just like the Eagles was competitive. Came down to really one play defensively that ended up costing us the game. Paulson Adebo had a crucial pass interference call on him, and then ultimately we lost the game. Younghoe Koo hit the game-winning field goal. We're 2-2 at that point. So, Kansas City, week 5. Okay, that's the Monday night game. And let me tell you, I was not expecting the Saints to win that game. I was just hoping that it would be competitive. And for the most part, it really was a competitive game. But we ended up losing. But I wasn't too disappointed about that because it's the Kansas City Chiefs. What can you do against a team like that? But then Derek Carr got hurt. Derek Carr ended up hurting his back. He tried to carry the team on his back. But he ultimately couldn't do it. And then Jake Hayner filled in for him in a game that was pretty much decided at that point. And then there was questions about who was going to be the Saints starting quarterback. And now we're 2-3 at that point, mind you. So, going to week 6, we decided to start Spencer Rattler, the rookie out of South Carolina. And a lot of Saints fans, including myself, were excited when that happened. And to say that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game was something, all right? The first half didn't go too well in the first quarter, but then the second quarter, the team started to get things going in the right direction. Then at halftime, we're up 27-24. Spencer Rattler, for the most part, was playing a pretty good game. And not to mention, Chris Olave, the first possession of the Saints, ended up getting concussed. He was out for the game. So essentially, I'll finish at Chris Olave, but Spencer Rattler was really throwing it to Rashid Shaheed. That was his number 1 target at that point. So, he still had Alvin Kamara, but not a lot of help. Plus, his O-line was banged up too. So, in the second half, in that Tampa Bay game, defense, it's non-existent. Missing tackles, having mental errors, end up losing that game. It was a blowout. Spencer Rattler, once the Tampa Bay Buccaneers started to switch things up on him defensively, started throwing blitzes his way, the team ended up losing, and Spencer Rattler was, no pun intended, rattled. So we fast forward to Thursday night, a short week. We ended up losing to the Denver Broncos, who, congrats to them, they ended up making the playoffs this year. Shout out to Sean Payton. And they ultimately ended up winning that Thursday night game. Spencer Rattler, once again, literally had no help. The O-line, like I said, was banged up. Chris Olave ended up missing that game because of the concussion. And then he was basically throwing to really guys who were second or third string on the depth chart, and then guys who got called up from the practice squad. Really couldn't do much. And then defensively that game, they couldn't help him out neither. So at that point, we're 2-5. We've lost 5 games in a row. Then we take on the Chargers. We end up losing that one. So we're 2-6. But then help comes in the form of Derek Carr. Gets the Carolina Panthers, which ironically, the team that we ended up destroying in week 1 ended up beating us that game. You can't make this kind of stuff up, can you? So we ended up losing that game in a game where Derek Carr had the chance to lead us down the field and ultimately win that game. But then on 4th down, he ended up throwing the go route, which he didn't need to. Go back and see the highlight. He didn't need to do that. But then we ultimately lost the game. And now we're 2-7. At the start of the season off hot, 2-0, putting up 91 points in the first 2 games. We were getting this to our backside for 7 straight weeks. Alright? Now, the best news that happened for the New Orleans Saints came after that Panthers game. And that was when we ultimately fired Dennis Allen. And let me tell you something about Dennis Allen. You know, we gave him a chance. We really did. You know, his tenure with the Raiders didn't go so well. But to put some context on that, the Raiders team back then wasn't good. And it's ironic that he got fired 10 years ago in the 2014 season, and he got fired again in the 2024 season. A 10-year difference. So we ended up firing him after he took over an organization which had plenty of talent on their roster. Okay, the Saints had plenty of talent, more talent than the Raiders team that he took over 12, 13 years ago. But he got fired in the 2014 season, and he got fired this season. Because he doesn't know how to coach a team. He's not a real leader. He doesn't know how to be a leader amongst men. So we ended up firing him, and when I saw that notification come across my phone that day, I was happy. I was so happy. I was ecstatic. I was thanking God because even though I don't wish for a man to lose his job, when a man or a woman isn't doing their job properly, they deserve to go. And he deserved to go. So from here on out, his name is banned on this channel. If we do have to refer to him, we'll call him DA. But don't even say his name no more. Don't even say anything that sounds like Dennis Allen. Don't say Megan Thee Stallion. Don't say Jimmy Fallon. And if you're hungry, don't say my stomach is growling. Alright? Now let's move on. We promote Darren Rizzi to be our new head coach. And to say that the energy against the Falcons, the first game he coached in his first game as the Saints interim head coach, to say that game had more energy and the players were more bought in will be an understatement. That was a competitive game, a game that literally came to a Game 7 tackle by Ugo Amadi. Shout out to him. And we ultimately won that game. So we're 3-7. The losing streak is over. Okay, we lost 7 games in a row. It was so bad that a teacher can teach her kids the days of the week, and she can use the New Orleans Saints losing streak as an example during that time during the season. So at that point, we're 3-7. And then we take on the Cleveland Browns. Jameis Winston comes back to New Orleans. We end up beating them. We're 4-7. Then the bye week comes, and then people can talk about how the bye week killed our momentum. I don't really think so because the Rams were a team that you really couldn't take lightly. And even though the team had played well in the first half, the Rams started to get their mojo going in the second half, and that was a competitive game. Had that been under DA, we would have lost. Well, we ended up losing, but the loss would have been way worse. Well, it literally came down to the last play in that game where Derek Carr ultimately missed the target. He got pressured, and then the game ultimately came to an end. And I believe he called an audible that play, so that ultimately made things worse. But let's keep going. So we're 4-8. Then we take on the Giants in a game that was really, I didn't expect that game to be really competitive, to be fair with you. Now, shout out to the Giants for making things interesting all the way up to the final moments. But like I said, that was a game where that should have been a statement game. Even though we were struggling at that point, that should have been one of those games where we put away really in the third quarter, early fourth quarter. But we did it. It came down to a blocked field goal by Brian Brzee. Shout out to him. And we ultimately won that game. But we ended up losing that game too because Derek Carr thought he was Superman, and he decided to try to go all out to get the first down and he ended up hurting his hand. Now, so he was ultimately out for the season effectively. Even though he wanted to come back and play, the team, felt he wasn't good enough to go. He was out for the season. So at that point, we're 5-8, and then Spencer Rattler ended up taking control of the starting position. Wait, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. This is what happened. We gave Jake Hayner a chance. So after that Giants game against the Commanders, Jake Hayner started the first half, didn't do too hot, put Spencer Rattler in, ended up making the game interesting. It came down to a 2-point conversion. Saints had drove down the field and scored. The game was 20-19 at that point. Darren Rizzi, shout out to him. Even though some people didn't like the decision, I understood why he made that decision. Because he was like, hey, why settle for overtime when we can just go ahead and get the dub right now? But ultimately, Spencer Rattler threw it to Juwan Johnson. He couldn't get the catch. Game's over. We lost. But I wasn't mad about that loss either, because I liked how the team was competitive throughout the whole game, even though they struggled in the first half against Jaden Daniels. And that's been one of the key issues for the Saints. They haven't been able to stop mobile quarterbacks. But the fact that we were able to hunker down and limit them in a good way in the second half and made the game interesting and competitive, I like that. Even though we lost, I like the competitive spirit that the Saints brought that day. But things got worse. Apparently we played the Green Bay Packers for Monday Night Football a couple days before Christmas, but the Saints put up 0 points. So how did they play if they didn't put up any points? Just quick question. But we ended up losing that game 30-0. Basically, a game that really shouldn't have been on Monday Night Football, to be fair with you. But I thought the team would be much more competitive than that. I knew we would probably lose, but I didn't think it would be that bad. So at that point, things aren't going well. Our playoff hopes they were over, because prior to that Green Bay game, we were eliminated out of playoff contention. So at that point, we were just playing to play. So that next week against the Raiders, we're 5-10 at that point, and the Raiders came to New Orleans, and mind you, prior to coming to New Orleans, they had their flight delayed. They didn't get to the city until 1 a.m. We ended up losing that game 25-10. So we're 5-11. Spencer Rattler at that point had some good moments, but and here's the thing with Spencer Rattler. I'm not going to put a grade behind this rookie season, mainly because he didn't have a lot of weapons. He didn't have a lot of weapons at his disposal. When he got the starting gig back against the second half against the Washington Commanders, he had Alvin Kamara, but then Alvin Kamara ended up getting hurt in that game. So against Green Bay, he was playing basically without any real weapons, and that was basically what happened for the rest of the season. From that Green Bay game up until yesterday against Tampa Bay, he didn't have no help. Eric McCoy ended up getting hurt again, and I forgot to mention this earlier. Eric McCoy, who ended up being the glue piece for this team, got hurt in Week 3 against the Philadelphia Eagles, was out for a couple of weeks. He came back against the Cleveland Browns. He ended up hurting his, I believe it was his elbow. Ended up hurting his elbow, and then in that Green Bay game, and then ultimately he got put on IR. His season was over. So at that point, Spencer Rattler was once again playing behind a kind of makeshift offensive line, and then real with no weapons throughout the rest of the season. Now, not to make excuses for the guy, but it's kind of hard to see what a quarterback can do without any real weapons. Not to mention, he ended up having the worst drop percentage, basically meaning that his teammates, the wide receivers, the tight ends he was throwing to, ended up dropping the passes more than any other quarterback that started the league. Well, one of the quarterbacks starting in the league. So again, not a good season for Spencer Rattler, but not really his fault. I'll make a video about his rookie season, go more into detail about that. But let's keep going. So we lost to the Raiders, and at that point the season's over. Then we played against Tampa Bay yesterday, a game that was for the most part competitive, and that's one thing I can respect about Darren Rizzi. Ever since he took over, for the most part the teams were playing competitive, really, except for the Raiders and the Green Bay game. But besides that, the team was playing pretty competitively. Then yesterday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in the game where Tampa Bay really had to win to solidify the NFC South division title. We gave them a run for their money. We played them competitively at the first half. In the second half, they started to get things going. They started to get things going offensively and defensively. We ultimately lost the game 27-19. We're 5-12. The season is mercifully and finally over. So, what do we have to say about this season? Well, let's just say this. Never get too high when you win. Never get too low when you lose. Okay? There were some people that after that 2-0 start when we beat the Dallas Cowboys, people thought we were going to the Super Bowl. Now, I was trying to calm down my excitement, but at the end of the day, I have a right to be excited when my team does good. But then once we lost 3, 4, 5 straight games in a row, that's when I was like, "Yep, we'll be lucky to make it to the playoffs." So at that point, it was over with, because when you lose 5 games in a row, there's really no way that you can still be happy about the direction that your team is going with, especially what was going on to that whole time too. So that's one thing that we learned from the season. Another thing we learned from the season: don't put expectations on your favorite NFL team, because here's what happens. When you put expectations on your favorite NFL team, they don't meet the expectations. What happens? You're disappointed. Now, I ain't gonna lie. Going into the season, I thought we were gonna be a playoff team. Based on how things ended in the prior season, I thought we were going to at least be one of those competitive teams that end up making to the playoffs, winning the NFC South. And for the first 2 weeks, it looked like that. But then, things went awry. The season ended up not going the way we thought it was going to go. And ultimately, we get the number 9 overall pick in the draft, which I'm hoping we make a good pick. And not to mention, we still need to go out and get a head coach. Hoping that Mickey Loomis and Gail Benson made the right decision when it comes to that. Now, I'm going to need a detox from this team. So, in regards to any videos regarding the Saints, I'll probably take a month off. You probably won't hear me talk about the team again until really February. Now, if I talk about a player who just happens to play for this team, then that's different. But as for me talking about the team in its current state right now, can't do it. Can't do it right now. Can't do it. I need to, bring my energy back to talk about the team. Now, when we hire a good head coach or a coach that I'm confident in, then I'll probably make a video about that. But as for right now, I need a detox from New Orleans Saints, bro. I really do. And this season was one of those seasons where it teaches you about life. Because we were one of the top teams for the first 2 weeks, and then took a nosedive. So this is a lesson to everybody out there that when you're high, don't get too high. Okay? Because you can come crumbling down at any moment. And I believe that's what this team taught a lot of people this year. So that's the video. That's ultimately the video where I talked about the team, and yeah, this was a doozy of a season. And to be fair, I don't know what to expect from this team next season. I'm not going to put any expectations on this team because I don't even know who the head coach is going to be for next season. But I will tell you this: it's not too hard to rebuild this team. Okay, yeah, we're in salary cap purgatory. I understand that. That's basically every year with the Saints. But here's the thing: this team is talented. This team has players on this team. This team has some dogs on this team. But if we can't find a leader amongst men who actually knows what he's doing at the head coach position, if we can't fix the mental errors that plagued this team throughout the whole season, if we can't, bring the energy that I know the New Orleans Saints can bring, we ain't gonna be a competitive team. We ain't gonna be one of those teams that the league and fans of other teams respect. We haven't been respected really ever since the 2022 season. And when we did have our respect, we got cocky, and we got, some of us got ahead of ourselves and thought we were going to be something that we weren't. So, like I said, this team, it's not too hard to bring it back into respectability, back to playoff contention. But it's going to take a lot of things to get to that point. So, like I said, this is the end of the video. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. And if you like videos like this, leave a comment and let me know. But like I said, this was the 2024 New Orleans Saints, ladies and gentlemen. And next season, hopefully, things will be better. But until then, see y'all at another time. KGF, keep God first.